Welcome to Business Talk here on Business Tech with me, Michael Avery. Now, executives everywhere have been thinking through the contours of the next normal. How are they going to lead the people and the businesses that they superintend through the next 12 months as the world races to find a vaccine? And what are the scenarios that could possibly unfold? Well, before the COVID-19 pandemic struck, South Africa's banking sector was already dealing with an ongoing economic recession, a ratings downgrade. Things are now looking worse. Indeed, we've been downgraded again. Banks have been particularly hard hit, but also extremely prudent in their provisioning for a rise in bad debts. And so far, we've seen through the trading updates that banks have been ultra conservative. It's probably a little less bad than initially feared, but still very tough out there. Now, I first met my next guest at a financial inclusion conference a couple of years ago. He was then head of the strategy management office of Time Digital by Commonwealth Bank SA. Since then, the bank has been bought by African Rainbow Capital and launched as the country's first fully fledged digital bank. TymeBank CEO Tauriq Keraan, welcome to the show, and very good to catch up and see you again during what has been a very difficult year. How have you been keeping?
Michael, thanks for having me on and for that very generous introduction. I don't think it's often one can say that you've sold the same business twice, and maybe there's a book in that for me for another life. It's always good to talk with you. No, I've been well. Thank you for asking. These are life-altering moments that we are in, and it's important to be present. It's important to hold your nerve, and it's important to be empathetic.
Empathy is an interesting way of starting a conversation like this, because what I've found through this crisis is that while we've all been forced to go and reflect for a while, work from home, if you're fortunate enough to be able to do that, I think what the crisis has also done is it's opened us to the human side of our colleagues. We're Zooming, we're talking to each other in each other's living rooms, homes. We're personalizing what has tended to be a very business-like relationship. How are you finding that empathy evolve from your vantage point as the leader of TymeBank?
It's so interesting you asked that question, Michael, because as much as I am a digital banker, I consider myself firstly a student of the School of Leadership. It was just the other day I stumbled on an article on one of the social media platforms. I can't remember the title exactly, something along the lines of 10 best lessons from coronavirus or something like that for leaders. And I read it, and this thing had gone almost viral. And with humility, I didn't find anything compelling in there. It was speaking about presence. It was speaking about the need for radical transparency. It was emphasizing that you need to put people first and not see them as resources. All of those things that have been an integral part of our fiber and culture as TymeBank. But one of the things I have learned is those values get tested when you are under pressure, right? So your ability to hold your nerve, to keep a stiff upper lip, and to remain authentic and have conviction in your leadership style is critically important. So when this thing started, like all the banks, there was a lot of mystique around this virus, particularly the mode of transmission. And so the first thing we had to do was ensure business continuity. And I was around the banking sector in the GFC of 2008, and when you have a market dislocation like this, the first thing to go is liquidity. So as banks, we had to make sure that there was sufficient liquidity. But looking at the banking sector as a whole, we're well capitalized, and we've got good liquidity coverage. Then it was, the sort of hygiene things, the public health measures, getting PPE around and all of that, and making sure that our staff could work from home. Specifically at TymeBank as a new bank, the emphasis of what plagued us was slightly different in this regard, because we had been working remotely for many, many years. But we had never worked from home perpetually.
Yeah.
And coming back to your question, Michael, I think that is one of the areas in which we we are probably reflecting, because I think that overconfidence, we in being that overconfident, we've somewhat underestimated the longer term mental health detriments of working in this fashion. And it's something we're grappling with, but this is really important because I mean, a guy like me, for all the years, I, for example, never sat in one place in the office, right? I would sit in the call center today, fraud department tomorrow, technology the next day. And when I hear of a problem, I would get up, walk to somebody's table, and on the way to walking there, I would bump into two other colleagues, and that will help me refine my understanding of the problem. So by the time I get to the other person's desk, we quickly solve it. It's a little bit of that grease in the wheel that we have lost, but that we are overly obsessed about safeguarding through this period.
How do you safeguard it? And it's an interesting element that I find fascinating from a leadership perspective, because what you're talking about is that DNA of the organization, that culture. And being a new digital bank as well, you're still growing that culture, you're still developing that culture. And to now have to do it remotely, to not be able to be, as you say, that grease in the wheel, to pop your head into another department, to brainstorm for a little while, to go have that coffee, to say, have you thought about it this way, that face-to-face interaction. How are you guarding that culture in this new digital environment?
Yeah, about 15 years ago, I met somebody who has become a mentor of mine. He's 20 years my senior. He had a 35-year track record of running businesses that involved managing thousands of people spread remotely across the country. It was a field marketing business, and I was always intrigued and captivated with how he managed to safeguard such a strong culture, given that sort of distributed workforce. And what it comes down to, and what we've done at TymeBank, is it starts with intent. And it starts with having a purpose-led organization. Now, at the end of the day, businesses have to be commercially self-sufficient. That goes without saying. But the way you get ongoing collaboration and quick resolution of problems in a trying time as this goes beyond the mechanics of things, right? It goes to the heart of giving people a bigger reason to wake up in the morning. And our reason very clearly is to build a strong, commercially viable bank by making services available to everyone in this country, right? And we do so by breaking new ground in the innovation path. And I think that message has been incredibly compelling and has been the cornerstone of driving motivation and tenacity through this period. Now, there are some logistics around this that are quite difficult to overcome. So we've started moving people back into the office in a very structured and deliberate fashion, and having leadership presence. But also we've had to go the extra mile online. So for example, every Monday, it's just been a continuation of what we've been doing for the last 2 years in this business, is that, we will have something called the all hands, and over 200 staff will call into that. And that's a forum for updates, but also for a bit of inspiration and motivation as well. I personally meet with staff in groups of 20 that's manageable online every 2 weeks. Have done so for as long as I can remember. And we've got a very strong leadership team that shares the same philosophy of leadership. And so there's consistency in terms of how we engage people in the business.
From that perspective, my follow-up was going to be on the flip side of this coin. I think many were worried about productivity levels perhaps declining as we started working from home. And you've got the kitchen around the corner, you go make yourself a cup of tea, you're going to be distracted. And I think far from it. What we found is people are actually far more productive at home. We're not spending that time in the commute in the mornings and the afternoons. We're spending the time that we would have walking from meeting A to meeting B actually at our workstations. And we're probably working a lot harder than we've ever worked before. How mindful are you of the mental health aspects of managing your staff to ensure that they don't overwork and burn out through what is a very difficult time emotionally and mentally as well?
Yeah, we're incredibly conscious of this, Michael. It's a good point you're making. So, there's this. I don't know if you're a cricket fan or not, but
Huge cricket fan.
I'm told that one of the secrets, me too, one of the secrets to batting long innings in tests is your ability to switch off between deliveries. Right?
Yeah.
And some of the greatest batsmen have perfected the art of finding a blade of grass to focus on and to give them that mental break. So within the context of startup new banking, what is that blade of grass? and because the temptation is to do what you've exactly said. So instead of, yes, in the short term, you might be not driving to work, but actually that would have been your 30 minutes of meditation or self-help, whatever the case may be. And so we are acutely conscious of this. The only way to do this, Michael, is to and sort of to break the resistance or the temptation of back-to-back online meetings, is to actually just schedule our time and be very deliberate that in team meetings on a Friday afternoon, whatever, we'll have a quick check-in. We won't do our usual hardcore, this is where we are, and just shoot the breeze at a human level. One cannot underestimate the benefits of that. It's absolutely critical. We cannot do things that are expedient and result in burnout. I don't think that will be in the interest of any stakeholder.
Yeah, take a leaf out of the mighty Hash's book, who is renowned for those long innings, and he had absolute focus and the ability just to play each delivery on its merits and to zone out in between. And I think that is becoming a real art, and great to hear that you think about that so deeply at TymeBank. From a banking perspective, though, you're a digital bank during a time when the time for digital banks has arrived, right? I mean, contactless, digital, this has all been accelerated by COVID-19. How have you seen this impact operationally at TymeBank? And what are some of the interesting behavioral shifts that you're seeing amongst your clients?
Yeah, so the first thing is that we have still managed to grow through this period. And that's really important as a startup bank, right? So we launched just over 18 months ago publicly. And we have 2.5 million customers. 1.5 million are active customers. And I think that speaks to the strength of our proposition and how well it's resonated with the public. Some of this is good fortune, right? You've got to have the humility to realize this. So an example of that is through the hard lockdown. We were fortunate in that we were in an essential service being delivered through another essential service, right? Because Pick n Pay and Box are retailers. So there's a bit of good fortune in this, but we have seen sustainable growth. The second thing we have seen is how these customers are behaving. So we have seen, for example, the online purchase of what we call value-added services. These are data bundles, airtime, bus tickets, and so forth, increased threefold through the duration of this pandemic. We've seen our gross deposits, so in other words, the total amount of money we take into the bank, increase by about 10% month on month. Now, obviously, our liability book doesn't grow at that rate because if you don't have a lot of primary banking customers yet and you're driving high activity, a lot of that flows out. But remember, we are a digital bank, but we are also a scale player, which means we do use physical touch extensively, right? So the delivery of cash in and cash out through Pick n Pay and Boxer stores, and also onboarding digitally in 5 minutes at these kiosks that we have in Pick n Pay and Boxer stores. And the reason I mention that is because the number of customers through the pandemic that have onboarded on our kiosk versus through our website or through our smart app has been 4 times higher, right?
Remarkable. So,
Yeah.
I mean, on that point, the hybrid model then, I mean, everyone talks about digital and it's the end of brick and mortar. I think what you're demonstrating is that this is much more a hybrid model play.
I have high levels of conviction that in the foreseeable future, this is not an existential debate around whether the future of banking is digital, whether it is physical. I believe very strongly that these two channels will coexist, particularly in developing economies like ours, right? The amount of cash that we take through that exchanges hands in South Africa is incredibly high. By volume, I think still over 60%. We are still predominantly a cash society. Now, obviously, that's changing over time.
Yeah.
And despite increased access to things like data, smart devices, and so forth, as South Africans, it is important that we can still look one another in the eye as a form of trust and reassurance. And I don't think that's going to change, certainly not while you and I are around, Michael.
What does that mean from a strategic perspective? I mean, obviously the Boxer Pick n Pay partnership is working quite well for you. How do you now take these learnings from the first 18 odd months and use them to further scale the business into 2021?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things at play here. So the one is that we have nearly perfected a model within the retail store environment that lends itself to photocopying into other partners in future, right? But there are elements of that model that with slight tweaks you could replicate in non-retail environments. So a good example of that is the partnership we have with the ZCC, where instead of using the fixed version of our kiosk, we use a roaming version. And by the way, that was no trivial task because this thing is robust, it's ruggedized, it has additional elements of innovation that allow it to survive in the dust and in the heat, and with lower levels of reception. So that's on the distribution side of things. We are fortunate in that we don't necessarily have a scaling issue, right? Because the business that we get through Pick n Pay and Boxer, now the ZCC, even though it's quite affected still by COVID, and also online, is not a concern for us. But I do think it's easily replicable. I think that the deeper question is perhaps how do the old banks respond and transform given these major systemic shifts that are happening in the landscape.
Absolutely. And we know there is a huge untapped, unbanked market still out there. And I mean, just in the ZCC deal alone, you're talking many millions who could potentially come into the network. I just want to zoom out a little bit more and look at this from a country perspective. I'm reminded, having just recently read VBS, A Dream Defrauded, and how, at the grassroots of VBS was actually quite an interesting and noble idea to build a kind of black-owned bank. They were also trying to do deals before things were overtaken by state capture and corruption, with many religious groupings as a route to market. Where do you see South Africa today? We're trying to clean up the years of state capture. The Zondo Commission is ongoing. There's a fiscal crisis looming on the other side that the finance minister is really trying to draw a line in the sand on. He's trying to rein in expenditure. And then just the other day, we've got, again, political interference at the SABC when tough decisions have to be made. It's just the basic economics of it. You can't continue to bail out state-owned enterprises forever. How do you see South Africa in 2020? What's your view of the future from a macro perspective?
Yeah, Michael, there's no question there. Things have been tough before the pandemic, and they have been exacerbated through this period. I think it's gotten to a point where we have to confront the structural impediments that we face as a country. There's just too much, we hold too much debt as a nation, and the only way I see out of it is by growing, right? So now how do you do that? Well, firstly, you've got to stare the bear in the face, right? And what are those things? Well, power generation, right? And really getting on with it now to allow IPPs into the system. And we are in the race against time there, because these are not things that you flick on and off quickly. So we have to get to the bottom of our power crisis. There are positive signals, as you alluded to, coming out on corruption and progress being made there. I continue to hold my breath and wait for the convictions. Then you've got, we just have to make it easier to do business as well, Michael. Right? And I'm not advocating for any form of deregulation here, right? But just for a small business to register a company, to get a VAT number, all of those bare necessities that are necessary to start trading are things we really need to start pushing forward now as a country. And I don't have to tell you or any of your listeners how important the small business sector is for our growth prospects. So, probably let me just close out by saying that, and before the segment, you and I were chatting just a little bit about our resilience as South Africans. I mean, I do remember the days of boycotts and police kicking down doors and wearing yellow "Don't Vote" stickers on my school bags. So that's where we've come from as a country, and we are incredibly tenacious beings, and we will get through this. But we have to get on with it now.
Absolutely. We're pugnacious, we're gritty, we're those street fighters, all of those great characteristics that really are the hallmarks of our cricket team as well, that we hope will be on full display as the English land on our soil. What was that old joke about the English cricket team, where they're going to stay when they tour South Africa? Probably with their parents. I don't think it's quite like that anymore. They don't have too many expat South Africans playing for them. But on that note, Tauriq, it's always a great pleasure hearing your insights. Thank you for sharing your leadership approach during what has been a very difficult year. And congratulations on some of those growth milestones that TymeBank has achieved. And we look forward to seeing more innovation out of South Africa's first digital bank. Tauriq, take care.
Take care, Michael. Thank you.